for the sake of all beings, wisdom, compassion, non-clinging awareness. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Are there any questions or observations or discoveries or insights or problems? Yes.
I don't know what category it comes into, but an experience that's slippery and difficult to describe. So I wrote some words which make it a little banal, but as you guide us into this praxis of Samantabhadra, the playful aspect of mind is becoming more flexible. And for example, in relationship with memory, which habitually appears as a fixed lump, in my experience to engage in remembering within the praxis of Samantabhadra transforms the memory or reveals it as the praxis of Samantabhadra. Which is not an analytical process, but it's more of an alchemy. But not an alchemy with magicians and big hats. It's sort of ordinary, everyday alchemy.
Good. Yeah. Sometimes we get glimpses of our living experience that seem to, it's almost as if, my God, what have I been experiencing before this? You know, it's like just that kind of incremental increase, if you like, of dimensionalities of subtlety, which are very difficult to put into words, because words are not really, we could make an argument that words are actually not for that. You know, words are part of a very useful, pragmatic, if you like, of initiating communion, but not consummating communion. You know, I mean, the words are very useful. From, you know, hi, how do you do? Shall we meet at this time? What's it going on for you? And, you know, like you're initiating something, but with a kind of richness of sensitivity. There's so much more than merely that, and yet there isn't anything more than merely that, because with that sensitivity we can see that act of languaging as beyond words, staggering communion of the universe. Right? So it becomes, as you say, it can sound a bit banal and, I'm just going to just listen. I think it's quite helpful when we're approaching life and living in the manner that possibly we are here, to allow, just to kind of let go of any old thoughts about now I'm practicing and now I'm not. You know, this is the time for practice, and now this is the time for practicalities of living, or something like that. You know, however you divide it up. And it might be useful to borrow some of the concepts that we use in the Tibetan vehicle, where the wholeness of our living is, for convenience of understanding, divided into two different aspects. Right? One is called meditation, and the other is called post-meditation, which is quite banal. Right? And it takes a while for most people to realize the profundity that's being pointed at with this, because initially, when the Westerner hears those two categories, you think, oh yeah, practice and practicalities of life, right? Like it's just referring to these other things only with different words. But actually, in the Mahamudra and Dzogchen tradition, we recognize that in the course of, let's say, a classic 1-hour sit, you go in and out of meditation. Right? Like, meditation isn't defined by the amount of time you spend cross-legged on your cushion. Meditation here is particularly talking about deep, inclusive qualities of absorption. Okay? And it's not talking about some ultimate absorption. It's very practical in the sense that it's talking about absorption, deep and subtle qualities of absorption for you. Right? So for this yogi it's this, and for that yogi it's that. Okay? And a sense of absorption, not I am absorbing into some theme of meditation, but it's actually more closer to every conversation, like of dyad of conversation, this cell and this cell, this organ and these organs, these organisms and this perception and that memory and what have you, are all mutually absorbing into each other in the sense of a kind of visceral knowing of interdependency, that there is no meaning of one as opposed to the other, and hence you could say absorption. Mm-hmm. Right? It's an absorption that it's a primordial absorption in the sense that it's always been, rather than an absorption that you kind of make happen and you go into absorption and out of absorption. Right? And so there is in this there'll be a degree of less verbalization, sometimes absolutely no verbalization, right? But less verbalization. There'll be a degree of kind of vitality and aliveness in your body. There'll be a degree of pleasurable interest. It doesn't matter what the absorption is, these qualities are going to be there. Right? There'll be a definite kind of decreased tendency to story spinning, like on the basis of any particular thing you're experiencing, and then bang, you go off in we used to call it verbalization. Right? I like story spinning. It kind of illustrates more what we're talking about. Right? As you kind of link concepts and so on in a big story. Oh, I'm making progress. This must be absorption. Right? And so it's not saying you may have an experience of absolutely no story making. There could be absorption. But if you have been lost in chronic absorption and the story making becomes, lost in chronic story making, and then the story making becomes sort of a little bit diminished. It's almost as if the volume turned down or something, So that's a kind of absorption, perhaps, for that person, right? So in our meditation, it's like a sense of coming into this absorption, and in this case, we're talking about an absorption of interbeing, interknowing, everything, right? And then post-meditation, right, is when you realize that you're not in that absorption. You may still be sitting there doing the mantra and doing the practice and thinking about Dharma, and it feels like, but it's not the absorption. This is post-meditation. And in post-meditation, right, the practice isn't kind of absorption. The practice is applying compassionately the implications of what you're beginning to realize through your experiences of absorption. right? So you know, that applies to whether you're up and interacting with other people and creatures and situations and so on. But it could be also that you're not up and doing anything different. You're just suddenly that kind of sinking, not pleasant feeling in your stomach has sort of come up again, and you go, oh no, not again, and so now this is post meditation is not non-practice. There's the whole of your 24 hours is divided up into is practice. It's either meditation or post-meditation. Meditation, you could say, emphasizes the wisdom aspect, and post-meditation emphasizes the compassion aspect. Right? And how we act compassionately, it's like to conjoin that with wisdom is when you have an experience that feels profound and more connected and so forth. I think if you're open to it, you'll see that there are certain implications in that experience for you. You know, it's almost as if your mind is going, you know, if you had a thinking hat on, it was going, well, if this is the case, then how come in my work or in my relationship with so-and-so and so-and-so, it's, you know, like, you know, there's implications for how I would be in the world. If there are no implications for how you would be in the world, then I know from in my own sort of flow of living, I would question whether that was actually an insight into wisdom at all. Okay? And so the post-meditation is almost like the practice of the implications or the reverberations or the afterglow of the absorptive, the more absorptive, right? When you're kind of more into it. Okay? And this is I think this is really valuable because people get very much detoured, you know, by conjuring up the idea that they want to experience jhana or this jhana or that samadhi or this stage of insight or path moment or what have you, and they're kind of thinking about that, going for it, and how can I have that, and so on, right? And they think that's to be really deeply and passionately engaged with the practice. But it's quite possible that there's no meditation the way we're just talking about it, and there's no post-meditation. Okay? This is called the Buddhist hell. It's kind of the Buddhist hell of the 37 factors of enlightenment, right? And the 5 stages of path and so on and so forth. Okay? They're kind of, Buddhists, of course, are much more subtle and refined beings, and so their hell is much more subtle and refined, but nevertheless, right, it can be miles away, right, from what, you know, we're kind of trying to hint at in this time together, right, which is it's almost like you could drop it. You could just drop Buddhism. You could drop religion. You could drop meditation. You could just drop all that stuff. Because somehow the possibility of nourishing a capacity to embrace the entire of the universe, physically, emotionally, mentally, understanding, and so on, seems to be just so much more engaging. You have that. So, you know, you have an experience like this, and in the experience you could feel as that's arising before you verbalize it. There's an aspect there that we would maybe categorize as meditation. Okay? And then the kind of afterglow, I don't particularly like that, right? I'd rather think implications, but afterglow gives a kind of a feeling-y kind of picture of it. Like how extending this into a more active mind. An active mind is always, in the sense that we're talking about here, a non-absorbed mind. Okay? Because to have any activity, you've got to have two. Because activity is always relative. Like if we're standing back to back and we both walk away from each other, we could say we're walking away from each other, right? If we stand back to back and then one person just stands there and the other person walks away, right? You could say, oh, so-and-so's walking away from that person, right? But if there were two beings standing back to back in the midst of interstellar nothingness, because what we didn't take into account was that there were forests and trees and path and so on, right? If there was no, and then, it's a little bit difficult to visualize someone walking away from someone in interstellar nothingness, but I want you to picture it, right? Or maybe it's just like totally black or something, but that doesn't help. And you kind of got an observer, and actually all you can see is the two beings going apart. And there's neither one, it's not possible to see one is moving and the other one's, it's just, you need to have a frame of reference outside the movement in order to judge that it's moving. You can't tell the person's not moving away from this person unless this person is still. These two people can't even be moving away unless there's something outside both of them, right, to measure it against. So as soon as I'm thinking about this, or I'm considering that, in a way, we could say that there's a possibility of more absorption. I'm trying to put it in a kind of positive way. Right? But when there's absorption, right, like complete, the whole universe, like to give rise to this this is absorption right now. Bang, what we're doing, this is absorption, right? If we understand that the entire universe at every level of beingness is collaborating, right, in bringing this forth, then there's just union. Right? And so, there's like in the union, there's nothing to be done. Why would I want to leave this union? We're going to get onto this today with refuge. It's like refuge is something that you're interested in getting to when you don't have it. And it's something that's inconceivable to ever want to leave it if you do have it. Right? However, you do leave it. Right? So it's just, all I'm trying to do here is to give you a sense of how you could conceive a 24-hour period as a continuum of practice. Right? Some of the practice looks like meditation. Some of the practice looks like post-meditation. Or sometimes they even say absorption and post-absorption. Right? And to, I guess I'm saying this also to give encouragement to the people who do have backgrounds in Buddhism, that this is official. This is not a Tarchin invention, right? This is absolutely right. Chengpa spoke about this extensively, right? This is not just a Tarchin invention. And
this has to do with relation, being in relation to something. And it also has, there's a few things, there's a lot going on. So I remember in the past thousands of moments of what felt like pristine stillness and vibrantly awake presence in my work, for example, particularly also about the river. Similar quality. It's in relation to something. And now here I am. So sorry.
That's all right. No. Do you need a bang on the back? I found that as the years go by, I more and more often swallow a bit of spit, totally uncontrollably, and then end up hacking and coughing like I'm drowning on this tiny bit of spit. And,
I don't know what it was.
Yeah.
Sorry, Anne.
Sorry.
All right, I've been coughing myself. So now that's in the past. Those are memories. Good ones. Now I'm particularly sitting, not so much with walking meditation, because it seems more relational with the ground as I'm moving. But particularly sitting. Now, as I've got older particularly, I have developed a greater capacity for being alone, let's put it that way. Not needing. I am enough, not needing. However, when I sit, I have I'm at a loss. I'm not engaging in relationship to. I've got the ideas, I've got the theory.
Yes. It's a bit difficult. Yeah, absolutely. We say sometimes that, in order to meditate, you need to have a clear object of meditation, which in a way means to have a clear relationship, right? If it's not like as you're pointing out, in these more active situations, the clarity of the relationship is clearer. It's there, and yet in sitting, it's not so clear, and so in one sense, it's a matter of skillful means of working on this, and so it's skillful in a sense to be able to utilize situations that do give you this sense of relationship. Here in retreat I'm talking about. So, for example, walking helps, or being by the river, if I understood right? This kind of thing, right? And so you start with something that it's clearer, right? And you come into that kind of absorption with that. And then just sort of sit down, have a short sit. In the Karja tradition, in the Mahamudra teaching, we say at the beginning you should make your meditation short and frequent. And everyone thinks that means, I'll just have a 20-minute sit or a 3-minute sit, and then eventually it'll get longer. No, it said, they were actually saying at the beginning, make your absorptions short and frequent. That's what they're saying, because that's what they really mean by meditation. Not just the form of the practice, right? And so you might sit down and you've got a bit of a reverberation of, because you say you have a memory of this kind of absorption from the past, but the memory is a reverberation or a resonance that's happening now. It's not totally in the past, right? So there's something here, but it's subtle, right? And then just sit there and give yourself something specific to focus on. So maybe you're focusing on the smiling, or the breathing, or the present, or the thing, or meeting all beings with kindness and interest. Almost like every word and little tiny phrase in here could be an object to relate to, But you've got to have it's not necessary for you to relate to this as it says. It is necessary for you to relate to something or someone who you feel, who draws your interest to relate to. Otherwise you don't, right? So you sit there and you have a kind of a short kind of meeting with this, and then maybe it dissipates relatively quickly, right? Get up and walk a bit more, or, right? And you're sort of going back and forth. You're working from your strength. One other thing that I'd like to suggest as a possibility to experiment with is and I'm going to use what I imagine your life experience is, based on having shared some of your life experiences occasionally, right? That you are with a woman nearing her birth, right? And she says, I can't breathe, I can't. And you have a quality in your being when you relate to her at that moment, right? And it's not a quality of trotting out some theoretical intellectual explanation of why the birthing goes this way and the 47 factors of enlightenment and the this and the that and the other. Sometimes what you say is kind of just meaningless. It's just blather, right? Because the meaning was in something nonverbal that was being conveyed, and a sense of that extraordinary presence. And in a sense, that extraordinary presence isn't being hijacked by the kind of expressions of suffering and struggle, right, that may be happening in the person who's giving birth. It's not that you're oblivious to that, but you've got a lot of experience with it. You're not hijacked by it, right? And there's a quality of attentiveness and patience and trust. Something's being born. Well, something's being born in you. You know, in your meditation, you know, you're sitting there and there's kind of, I can't sit here without this, like, I don't know what to do. And you're going, just breathe, or just, right, or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, just to pant a little bit, or, you know, like, whatever. Would you like a little cushion under your back, or, right? Because I can remember, you know, like years back, and I don't remember the details of it, but you know, maybe the first or one of the first births that I was able to be at with you, and actually, quite frankly, I noticed this, and Mary noticed it. We both shared it with us. It was just this kind of incredible difference between you in your kind of, I'll call it professional, passionate element, and the way that we often saw you other times, you know, and it was like, you know, it was incredibly competent, very there, very present, and very, but very compassionate, you know, and so on. Well, those qualities, that's like, you can contact that, because that's you to a degree. I'm not trying to, you know, set you up and you're feeling, oh, I'm not that. But there's something there, whatever it is that's there. There's something there, and there's a quality of absorption. There's a kind of absorption that's there, and so when I'm sitting, when I do, the reverberation or the resonation begins to kind of fade, and the relationship becomes a little less functional, right? So you start to drift around, and then thoughts come about the drifting around, or critiques come about the drifting around. Would it be possible to somehow, I don't know how you're going to do this, but somehow use that, touch that experience with the quality, like you're midwifing? As I put this, I felt like this this sadhana was midwifed into the universe, by the universe. You know, like I'm midwifing this moment. And you know that you're not birthing that child. But you also know, in a way, she's not birthing the child either. Right? On a good day, it's like the whole universe is birthing the child. Right? And the whole universe is birthing this moment. So these are two things. One is to utilize walking or rivering or any other things that you notice are more engaging, right, in the way that you're talking about, and then have short sits and see if you can explore, like, what is that quality? Can I just rest with that quality, breathe with that quality? And if you do tend to get, if there is like a hijacking, a complaining, or a kind of losing the plotness or whatever, could I treat that as if it was the woman who's at that moment very understandably not dwelling in a confidence that the process of birthing she's engaging in is natural, and and give yourself a similar kind of support and encouragement, and see if that can be useful.
Tarchin, thank you, that's so helpful. I think the other thing I want to say is there's a fear that I need that set of circumstances. I need to keep working for that experience. I'm afraid that you've spoken and answered very well. I just needed to verbalize that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, just reviewing a sec, I mean, we've got preparation, contemplating bodhicitta, and in the way that we've been speaking about it, you might perhaps get a sense of how this could be encouraging deeper absorption, right, in the fullness of the living that we are. Right? So it's a kind of an entry. It's like this is the beginning point of the practice, this absorption, this meditation. Right? And then we come to the section of refuge. Right? Within this primordial space of contemplation, you know, for me, and instead of space, I could say ocean. You know, it's like a sense of almost like releasing into the ocean of primordial contemplation. When I think of primordial contemplation, I don't mean me contemplating something that's primordial. I mean the contemplating that is the universe that's been going on from the very beginning, right? As soon as there was more than one, there was responsiveness, right? And they templated each other, right? The activity of this one templates this one, and the activity of this one templates that one, and then there's 4, and then there's 8, and then there's a universe. Okay? And so this sense of like surrendering into an ocean of primordial contemplation. This is not meditating on the breath. It's not meditating on anything. Okay? It's, in a sense, meditating on it's just surrendering into the dancing of awareness that beingness is. Okay? Within this primordial space of contemplation, okay, without departing of this, reflect on refuge. In other words, reflect on your deepest sense of groundedness, connectedness, your sense of good functioning, sense of belonging. Okay? That's why I say, like, when you're truly in a state of refuge, why would you ever want to leave the place of refuge? So take refuge and then move on to the next. No way. I'm not moving on to the next section, right? Because the very nature of refuge is that there's a feeling of completeness. There is no not enoughness or next step or anything. It's just this, right? And this is what you do. This is the third step. First of all, do the preparation work, arranging, strengthening posture, body, brain, mind community, settling into pristine stillness and awakeness, feeling within this the stirring of this mystery of bodhicitta, right? And then increasingly recognizing that this is where I belong, this is where I sit, this is my unmoving refuge. They're all the same, right? This is holographic sadhana, in which every section is a total ditto of the one before and after. Okay? But not quite, because this could also be described as a deepening, enriching, enlarging Mahayana-ing, right, of our lived experience. And sometimes what's been said here thus far is all you're interested in hearing about as a reminder for this section. Okay? Within this primordial space of contemplation, this is of course assuming that you're experiencing a primordial space of contemplation, right? Then having a little bit within this, without departing from this, reflect on, right? Now reflection is like something, when you reflect on refuge, refuge is reflecting on you. Like it's, you could almost say engage with a deepening appreciation. The classic mirror story is Narcissus, right? Who falls into the mirror. But the reflection we're talking about here is, it's Narcissus is not the only narcissist, right? The mirror's a narcissist because the mirror falls into itself. Right? The mirror falls into Narcissus, and Narcissus falls into the mirror. Okay? As we like for us to have a conversation, there have to be both of us. In a sense, the conversation is neither of us. Right? And so instead of saying reflect on refuge, we could say, well, appreciate refuge, right? And appreciate refuge means to me appreciate what you can do with it. What's its use? What's its value? What is it? In other words, here the possibility of having a subtle think, right? In the midst of a space of primordial contemplation where the thinking is not a kind of enemy of the primordial contemplation, right? It's all inclusive, right? You're just considering this question like, where do I belong? Where does anything belong? The fact of the matter is we have very strong feelings of belonging. That's mine, that's yours, I belong, I don't belong, right? You might not have any feelings of belonging, but then that person probably has lots of feelings of not belonging. It's the same thing. It's still belonging. It's the same dharma. Right? So reflecting on this, right? Reflecting on your deepest sense, or your most expansive sense, or your most embracive sense, or your most inclusive sense, or your most subtle sense. Deepest is just an attempt. It's a kind of a weak adjective, right? But it's hinting, right? A fuller sense, right? Of groundedness, connectedness. What constitutes groundedness? Am I grounded in the Buddha Grove? You could think, I'm grounded in the moment of midwifing someone who's giving birth, like in that moment. So to go for refuge means to chronically have to go back to that kind of interaction. Okay? So we're kind of looking and seeing, can I find a quality of refuge which is true for me no matter where I am or no matter what I'm doing. Right? And this is our journey of refuge, is a refinement from having very specific, I take refuge in a heroin fix. Lots of people unfortunately do. You know, I take refuge in all kinds of sad, difficult, limited, small, not very widely functional places of refuge. But the feeling of belonging is so important to us. After all, we come out of the womb and the umbilical cord is cut, right? And you go like, hey, I want to go back. Or something, you know, so that we came in belonging. You know, a pregnant mother belongs with her fetus, right? Because a pregnant mother without a fetus isn't a pregnant mother, right? A mother belongs with her child, because without a child, this woman is not a mother. Okay? And the child is only a, you know, in a sense, the two go together. There's not belonging to. I don't belong to anyone. But I think it's like just totally apparent that each one of us belongs with, and we can start to list and die before we finish the list, right? Because we belong with the whole universe, which is necessary to give rise to the life that we're living. It's vast. Okay? So you're reflecting on this. Sometimes, right, the kind of idea of refuge is just a little bit too vague, right? It's like it's not clear enough to have a relationship with such an idea, right? So in that case, right, you could enhance the contemplation of refuge with the following words, right? But also you should feel free to express these aspirations word-wise or thought-wise in any other way that feels meaningful for you. Okay? So the refuge prayer that's here is only just a kind of a starting point suggestion. In my book, True Refuge, I don't know how many different refuge prayers I shared in that, but that was all because I kind of fell out of relationship with one of them. So I went online to, these kind of dating agencies, on the thing, because I was kind of feeling alone, so there's all these different ones for different types of people, so I'm told, right? So, but I went on the refuge one, right? So I kind of, I'd done it with wisdom and compassion. I said, wisdom and compassion is okay, but we've really done it. I'm finished with that. I've had that. I'm doing Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I've had it with Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. I'm doing Trikaya, right? Or I'm doing this, or it's kind of a silly way of looking at it. But in the process of this, I kind of recorded some of my love letters, right? Some of my little postings online as I advertised for a suitable mate, right? And I collected them all in True Refuge, right? So that you could kind of look at this quirky guy, right? And I have a feeling, actually, that the only difference between me and many other people is this, that I confess what I'm doing and many other people don't. Right? As if the party line was, I go refuge in the Buddha and the Dharma and the Sangha, or whatever it is, right? But I needed, for me, there was a feeling that this sense of groundedness and belonging and good functioning and so on and so forth was something which I was increasingly valuing. It's a very simple thing to say, but I mean this really deep way, right? And so with that, I want this, I need this, and when it's not present, I really appreciate a reminder. And a reminder that's not a reminder isn't a reminder, if you know what I mean. So if it's just a kind of I take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, now I don't feel any different. I just said that. On another day it can be Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, boom. You know, it has to be meaningful. Right? So if you find that there are other words in the flow of your life, you probably go through. I actually find that in the end, you know, I sort of had relationships with some of these beings, and then, you know, we had separations. I thought it was a divorce, and you know, it's really quirky, but I ended up getting married with the same person again. You know, it's like I kind of, I don't know if this is I couldn't learn my lesson, you know, and I kind of sort of weird thing, you know, but. Or whether or not actually they seem like a completely different person having journeyed through a maturing of life, and I come back to this one and, whoa, I never even saw this before, right? So I think it's actually quite useful to have a number of different reminders, different places of relationship to bring us into this mystery of refuge. Right? So these are some words. Bringing to mind my teachers and ancestors, along with my human and non-human companions on this path of life unfolding, on behalf of all of us, right? And this is referring to what I often speak of as the triple ground of being, right? Our kind of ecological ground, our ancestral ground, our ground of inspiration, mentors and teachers and so on. And I think that actually for many people to augment this sadhana with the practice of touching the earth in 6 prostrations can be very, very valuable. Okay? Because in that one we're just really opening up more detail of this. Right? And till that starts to become kind of contactable, like a sense of being embedded in an unfolding, evolving ecology of life, of being embedded in a kind of unfolding matrix of beliefs and understandings and attitudes and skills and dispositions for experiencing, which have come through ancestral, right, conditioning patterns, right, and so on, right, family structure. And I'm also absolutely absorbed in a kind of ambience, of more subtle ambience of inspiration, right, like right, which has kind of quickened in my being through my relationship with particular beings, right? I mean, convenience, we call them teachers or gurus or mentors or what have you. And so the more we can have a sense of being able to recognize this is the earth, this is the belongingness, like everything that I experience is a weaving of these 3. All 3 weave through each other, right? And in a sense, this is the body, brain, mind community that I am, right? I'm resting in this. Right? On behalf of all of us, I take refuge in the true state of affairs. This is ever fresh Buddha in action. And, you know, there's 3 other ways of paraphrasing the true state of affairs. It's very arbitrary. I could have maybe met 30 or 300 or 3,000, right? But 3 seemed enough. It didn't fit on the page otherwise. Right? I take refuge in the true state of affairs, spontaneously ever-present, timeless awareness. Okay. Radically inclusive love, unfolding in all its fullness. The vast ungraspable suchness that is this living world universe. You don't have to hang on to all of them. It's sort of like, does one of them speak to me? It's like, this is the true state of affairs, is spontaneously ever-present, timeless awareness. That's what's going on. The true state of affairs is radically inclusive love unfolding in all its fullness, because we are living in a collaborative creation. And staggering numbers of beings give their lives to be in a sense, to energize the lives of others. All beings live by nutriment. We live by eating each other. And this is maybe one of the great human problems, is that humans seem to have less capacity to accept that they are not just eaters, but they are eaten. And humans are the one creature that figure out that they should be able to eat all they like, but not have anyone else eat them. Right? And you know, in a sense, like, if you took this as a metaphor, I mean, physically, that's true. You know, no other creature embalms the bodies of their co-species companions so that no one else can eat them. They can lock them up in a box, you know, with lead lining and everything, and try and, you know, keep the body all like that, or just burns the whole thing, you know, like goes up in smoke. You know, I mean, that's at the physical level. But at another level, in a sense, we eat each other's energies, and we eat each other's ideas, and we eat each other's beauty, and we eat each other's anger and fear and frustration, right? And in a sense, like food, you know, you are what you eat. So if you kind of eat lots of agitation, you become more agitated, kind of thing. If you eat lots of, you know, so actually, not only do human beings, unfortunately, we get to this thing where not only do we not want anyone to eat us physically, but in a very strange way, we declare intellectual property. And unless someone pays me a correct amount, you're not officially allowed to eat my ideas, right? Or I'll sue you. Right? I mean, it's like tragically greedy. Right? And the whole of Dharma could be to radically inclusive love unfolding in all its fullness is radically inclusive, giving myself as a banquet to all beings, inviting them to come as guests. Right? This is the true state of affairs. Without that giving of each other to each other, there wouldn't be a universe. Right? The vast, ungraspable suchness that is this living universe, this is ever fresh Buddha in action. And I like that phrase, in action, because sometimes I think, like, you see these Buddha statues and they seem very inactive. But, you know, it's like, this is the active Buddha. And this is, we could say, this is ever fresh, joyous budding as ground. As, right, ground, the ground of my being. I recognize, celebrate, and cultivate the paths, teachings, and encouragements that support our realizing the true state of affairs. Daily I bring forth generosity, wholesome relating, patience, skilled use of energy, continuity of caring and inquiry, and wise understanding. This is Dharma put to good use. Okay. And this is, in a sense, we could say, this is fundamental praxis put to good use. This is like Dharma as fundamental praxis. The fundamental praxis of life evolving, right? Where, you know, we are the evolving life, and and depending on how we evolve, transforms the way we evolve, right? Like what I know transforms what I am, and what I am transforms what I can know, right? It's this kind of reflexive praxis. Releasing into a profound sense of being this continuously gestating mystery of communion. I am home. This is the experiencing of true Sangha, the fruition of all refuge practice. In a sense, we were saying that in the first part, in the preparation and in the bodhicitta, it's that, right? But it's a sense here, what the difference is that here we're beginning to acknowledge that this isn't just a nice place, this is refuge, like to really look at this quality. Could something of this be my ground from which I engage with the world? Gradually, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha appear to merge and mingle until we realize that each one contains and reveals the other two. This is a wondrous 3-in-1 refuge. So there's only one refuge. Boom. Right? The natural presence of Samantabhadra. It's hinting here that the true refuge is the natural presence of Samantabhadra, and the natural presence of Samantabhadra is true refuge. If you've never heard of Samantabhadra, but you live with appreciation of a quality of refuge which stands up in every and any situation, right? That when you're happy, this is true refuge. When you're miserable, this is true refuge. When you're healthy, this is true refuge. When you've been diagnosed with cancer, this is true refuge, right? It's just that, in other words, it's not this is true refuge if the situation can be like this, but the situation's not, so I don't have my refuge. It doesn't matter where you go, refuge is available. Okay? Then that is the natural presence of Samantabhadra. You don't have to call it that. Okay? But already we've come to the realization of the sadhana, and we've still got pages to go. We haven't even met the guy yet, right? If the guy is a guy. It's where we all belong. And here there's it begins, I take refuge in the true state of affairs. And then when you get down here, releasing into a profound sense of communion, I am home. And then suddenly it's until we realize that each one, right? This is where we all belong. Right? And so at this point also, what are the implications of a deepening absorption into this? You might think, what are the implications of this? And one of the implications might be that not only do I appreciate a more real, deepening sense of belonging, but it dawns on me that maybe others would too. And, in terms of being able to meaningfully help another person, right? We might be able to meaningfully help them lift a log up or not. That's kind of a meaningful way of helping. But from the point of view of trying to really help someone who's kind of struggling with the whole of their being with something, right? The implications of meditating on this may be that you see that can I interact with this being in such a way that our interaction becomes a likely encouragement for them to feel increased refuge and belonging. Not talking about it, but just doing it. This is what we mean by transmission in the Tibetan tradition and in Mahayana tradition. This is what empowerment actually is. Okay? It's not so much empowering, like you're getting some kind of super duper energy coming from someone else. It's more like somehow in that moment of relating, there is a kind of ambience that's set up that is like a really good situation for relationship with everything that's good for the person. But the person does it, not the, you're not doing anything. I mean, you spend an awful lot of time just sitting around, right? Professional sitter breather, right? It's because there's nothing to say. You get to a point where this like talking isn't particularly just there. So it's kind of, I'm not doing anything. And then at the end they say, oh, and thank you. It's like, I'm so glad you were. Thank you, right? And in one sense, you could look in a kind of way. It's like, well, I didn't do anything. Just like I brought some skills, but other people could have done that. The outer form of where you put your hand and the word that comes out of your mouth and so on is less important than this kind of quality that's there. And so can I begin to live in such a way that encourages the possibility of beings that I meet with and engage with discovering for themselves truer refuge. And that means empowering the other. In other words, the other person feels, I can do this, rather than thanks for doing it for me. I mean, the confidence that you can, my body does have wisdom, right? It does kind of know how to give birth to this child, right? It's like I'm slowly, more confidence comes in this. Right? You still, very possible, another child could come along and all of a sudden you thought you were confident and didn't quite go the way you thought. Right? But generally speaking, there could be and we call that maturing, a kind of a woman with her first child and a kind of mature woman who's with her sixth child or something like that. I mean, they've had some experience. So, we have our experience. Smiling, breathing, present, appreciating, offering, I deepen this confident, knowing experience of refuge. And so here's the refuge, here's number 3. It goes like this. Within this primordial space of contemplation, reflect on refuge. Smiling, breathing, present, appreciating, offering, I deepen this confident, knowing experience of refuge. And if it helps to throw in a whole bunch of words in between, right, from time to time, just to kind of remind yourself of the texture of the meditation, in a sense, within you, anyone who's working with this over a longer period of time will feel that they're gradually developing skill in doing that, in bringing forth useful words for this moment and this situation, or thoughts or attitudes or so forth. So this is huge, right? In one sense, like the refuge is the whole thing, right? Looking for refuge, realizing refuge, being refuge is looking for Samantabhadra, realizing Samantabhadra, being Samantabhadra. It's all tied up in there. Are there any thoughts or questions from this? It's some people could easily spend 3 weeks just doing this, right? Not because, they're not very smart and that this is actually quite complex and it takes a while to get yourself into, right? But because simply this is like in a state of refuge, what else is there to do? It's like, this is glorious. How wonderful to just this ocean of primordial contemplation, this refuge.
I think sometimes when I read these beautiful phrases and aspiration towards refuge, I feel recently and currently a sense of just overwhelm and panic. Like I don't have that refuge, and I think conceptually I can think about it and see, oh yeah, that's what is, you know.
But you see, you need to meditate on the refuge that you experience, not the refuge that you think you'd like to experience.
Yeah.
And so when you do get into such a state where you're feeling like a little bit of a panic and a little bit of thing, and you know, then what do?
Sometimes I'll try to sit with it and to hold it tenderly, but other times it's too much and I find I just need to run away.
Okay, so the first time you practice, like I take refuge in sitting with it, holding it tenderly. There is no other refuge. I take refuge in running away. There is no other refuge. That's the refuge for you at that moment. This is real. This is what we work with. Right? We don't, you know, like I'm, you know, all hell's breaking loose, you know, it's like I'm starving, the bombs are falling, you know, people are dying all over the place, and see, I take refuge in love and clear seeing, you know. It may be, you know, like for some beings, they do that, they are. That's amazing, right? But you see, refuge is not an objective thing there that you go for. It's refuge for you. It's refuge for you. Like what is refuge for you? You know, if it's pouring with rain, refuge is an umbrella. You know what I mean? Like if the bombs are falling, right? Refuge is peace, and just having a totally corrupt government, totally corrupt society, illegality and veniality and all kinds of stuff going on, but no war. It's an improvement. Right? But then gradually we might be then going on, and now where's refuge? You know what I mean? And so it's a long journey, but we embark on the journey when we are able to recognize the value of honoring where we actually go for refuge or try to go for refuge, and bringing some attentiveness and interest and contemplation to that. That's why there's a chapter in True Refuge. I don't know if you've read it, but you know, I mean, I see so many people struggling with it, and I say, well, like, look where I take refuge in snacking. I take refuge in getting smashed out of my mind on Friday nights. I take refuge in driving the car at kind of hair-raisingly dangerous speeds. I take refuge in, I mean, this is like, so I said, like, what you do is you don't realize this, but this is where you're actually going for refuge. So, you know, I said to the person, instead of going like this in front of the shrine, I take refuge in the Buddha and the Dharma and the Sangha, I said, stand in front of the fridge with the door half open and just kind of gaze at all the food in there and say, I take refuge in snacking, right? And the thing is that by doing that, by turning that into an actual statement, because you really truly are, you know, before you'd really thought about it, by doing this and naming it, I take refuge in running away, I take refuge in, then there's some implications that come out of this meditation. And one of the implications is the question, does it really work? Is this the best I can do? So you become more discriminating. It's not just snacking, but it's in peanut butter. Not any snack will do, right? So you're becoming more refined, right? I'm being silly in a way, but what I am trying to point out, which isn't silly, is that you're beginning with where you are. So rather than like an expression of grand, this is the I have developed over the years a capacity to enunciate a large view for many people, right? And this can be a wonderful thing, right? But it can also be an absolute defilement and complete block for unfolding. And I'm aware of this, but I don't know what to do with it. I'm just I kind of, I'm going to offer this anyway because I'm offering what excites me. Okay? But the thing is that where it becomes a block is if people hear this grand, big thing of the cosmos and so on, and actually you're just sitting here, and imagine for a moment you kind of expand your appreciation, not to include all the stars and all the creatures and so on, but just to include just a meter out from your body in all directions. That's already expanding. You know what I mean? Or I'm going to sit with this and be with my breathing. This is taking refuge in Dharma. That's Dharma put to good use. Right? It's like practice, the actual practice. I take refuge in just pausing and smiling and breathing. I take refuge in, right? It doesn't have the grand kind of whole thing. And yet, but this is a true refuge for me, right? It takes me deeper into a more subtle, open state. And in that more subtle, open state, I can conceive a more subtle, open refuge as well. You know what I mean? So you're working from where you are. Even running away. I'm taking refuge in running away. Right? Well, what is that? Does it actually feel good running away? Because you say, I'm taking refuge in running away, but actually running away feels really crappy. You're deluding yourself. That's not refuge. What makes you, in a sense, if you don't know where to begin refuge, just say, what makes you feel good? In a sense, it's a kind of a... After the last operation, right? After about 3 days, I had a fart. Oh. Right. Oh, it was sort of like my guts were beginning to remember how to move, I was so constipated and so on. It's like, then I like a bowel movement. Oh, this was true refuge. Okay? It's far away from the totality of the Dharmakaya and so on, right? But in the state that I was in at that moment, it's like, and then in that opening, or I had a kind of experience in Sydney a number of years ago, and I got kind of hammered by a sudden attack of major kidney stone and ended up in hospital. And, I was doing everything I could, just kind of breathe into it, look into it, do Chenrezig. Nothing worked. It was just sheer unmitigated agony, right? And the guy finally came in and he just hammered in a huge vial of morphine, right? And my body went, oh. The sensation was still there, but that kind of total terrifying edge of unimaginable pain was off, and suddenly I was able to breathe with it. I could work with it, right? So run away or have a snack or go for a walk or that's enough. Now I can work with it. And then we're rather than having this idea, well, I've been meditating all these years as a meditator, I should quit teaching because I'm a fake. I had a kidney stone and I couldn't apply anything I said. If you look into the thing, the pain goes away and you just cut through and be in equanimity, right? Basically, I was kind of spent most of my time writhing on the floor and groaning. And then every once in a while I'd sort of look up and say, it's okay, Mary, and then go back to the groaning. Because there's still a little corner of the consciousness which is aware of, the implications of what's going on for other people. Even there. Does this respond to your question, your actual question?
It does.
Yeah.
What about a yoga relaxation?
Sorry?
What about a yoga relaxation? Just to give your body the invitation to...
Yeah, I mean, this is what, I mean, it may be you begin to realize your skills, that movement and so on helps, that kumye work or yoga or, some kind of go for a, physical thing. Sometimes it's a mental attitude. Sometimes it's kind of an emotional state. Sometimes it's you are, if you're following the instructions that I give, this hopefully will lead to you experiencing empowerment, right? But you experiencing empowerment is you having increasing confidence of being able to recognize, this is a situation, this would help. This is a situation, that would help. Okay? So without having to reference somebody else, right? And that confidence of being able to, not only have a kind of toolbox of Dharma, but the confidence to be able to more frequently use it when it's useful. That confidence is a moment of lived empowerment. Right? In other words, you're standing on your own feet. You're resting in your own mana. Yeah? And the whole teaching's about that. It's about empowerment. Okay? But unfortunately, in some traditions, we've sort of got it all muddled up with a ceremony, which is kind of an attempt to kind of hint at a possibility of empowerment, but the ceremony itself, an empowerment ceremony, is not necessarily an empowerment. And no teacher can empower anybody, right? Because by definition, it's not empowerment. If somebody else did it to me, empowerment is actually a realization that arises. I mean, I'm trying to mime it by, my posture and so on like this. It kind of arises in our being. It's like, it's not strutting around, I've got it all together now. It's just a quiet confidence to be able to step into the unknown, like I was saying the other day. I have no idea what I'll do, but I've got a kind of much more confidence now than I did years ago that I'll be able to kind of feel the situation and do something that will probably work. I think that's good enough. What more can we ask for? So, shall we stop for this morning? By the power of these wholesome activities, may our lives be rich with awakening. Living thus, may we abandon all unwholesomeness through the endless mystery of life. May we help all beings to realize their true interbeing, interknowing nature. Sarva Mangalam.